Hi, this is Dr. Steve helping you go a little deeper. It's Easter Sunday. Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. This is a traditional greeting that we as Christians use on Easter for the whole Easter season, the next 50 days. Lent was supposed to last for 40 days, not counting Sundays, and then the Easter season lasts for 50 days right up until Pentecost. And we continually celebrate the resurrection of Christ throughout that entire time. And we do that because this is one of those monumental events in history. This is a world-changing, universe-changing event in history. If you look at the Gospel of Matthew, which is the gospel reading for this year in the lectionary, you see that early on the first day of the week, or early after the Sabbath, that the women went to the tomb. And there's a really strong reason why all of the Gospels tell us it was on the first day of the week, why it was early on the first day of the week. It's because the idea is if creation itself, by God in Genesis, took 1 week, then this is the first day of a brand new creation. And so throughout the history of Christianity, throughout the history of celebrating the resurrection, we've always called the Lord's Day not only the first day of the week, but also the 8th day, that first day into a brand new creation. And if you look at traditional baptistries, baptismal fonts, or large baptismal pools, you'll see that they're all 8-sided to remind us of this 8th day, this new creation, where we're in this whole new type of universe where death has now been defeated. In Matthew's gospel specifically, if you look, we've got the story of the Roman centurions at the tomb. And Matthew's the only one that records this story. And it's really interesting because here you see the power structure of the world. You've got these Roman soldiers, the political and military might of the ancient world, who were hired by the Sanhedrin, the religious authorities, to stand guard at the tomb. And when the women get there and there's this earthquake and all this stuff happens, and then Jesus is found to be alive, he's no longer dead, you've got these two people who are representative of the world as it is, all of the power structures of the world, and they fall down as if dead. And that's what resurrection is about. It's about the complete upending of everything that we had expected in the world and how the world was supposed to work, and now we live into a whole new creation. Jesus died and is alive forevermore, and those powers that seem to be alive in this world around us right now actually fall down as if dead in front of him. And yet for this year, with everything that's been going on, it doesn't feel like Easter. It doesn't feel like we're really celebrating the resurrection of Christ because we're not with the people we're usually with. We're not doing the things we usually do. We're not celebrating in ways that we usually celebrate. The interesting thing about this is we're actually in a position now, dealing with Easter in the midst of quarantines and COVID and all of this, that our brothers and sisters down through history more often than not have been in. And a lot of our brothers and sisters around the world are still experiencing to this day when they celebrate. They can't get together. And throughout history, there were times and places where we couldn't get together to celebrate. And if we were to proclaim Christ is risen, we had to do it in such a way that we were very quiet as we were doing it. Because if we got too loud, the authorities would hear and they would come. This is one of those interesting things where we're celebrating the resurrection of Christ in the midst of what feels like, and not only feels like, but the reality is for some, death all around us. And in doing that, we see the seeds of resurrection among the tomb, just like those first women did on the first Easter. You know, they saw the empty tomb and then later they saw Jesus. And we experience part of the new creation in the midst of the decay of the old creation. And so we've got to try and hold on to that reality. You know, God is not just a God of good times. God is not just a God of blessing. The idea that if I am faithful to God, He will be faithful to me. If I am faithful to God, then I will always receive positive, good, wonderful, encouraging blessings in my life. That is not reality. Even Jesus Himself, as He's talking to His disciples, His apostles, His 12 chosen people in His special smallest group of followers, He says, the world persecuted me, they will persecute you. There was no promise that it was always going to be good. All but one of the original apostles died a horrible martyr's death. John the Apostle is the only one that died of natural causes. And according to a lot of church history, it's not for lack of trying. People tried to kill him a couple of times too. It's just that God overcomes death. He overcomes the evil of the world. He overcomes all of the problems that we have. And so we can still celebrate in the midst of the pandemic around us. We can still celebrate in the midst of having our lives completely upended and not knowing for certain what's going to happen all around us. It is precisely in times like this when we need to celebrate the resurrection of Christ the most. It is situations like this in the world today where the reality that Christ has defeated death needs to be most heard and most celebrated. The reality is all of the powers of this world are dead, and Christ is risen. The reality is that disease may still claim our physical lives, but Christ is risen. That politics may interfere with the way life is supposed to be, but Christ is risen. That finances might be completely upended and messed up, but Christ is risen. Christ is risen and death is defeated. Christ is risen and COVID and cancer do not have the last words. Christ is risen and there will be justice. Christ is risen and creation will be renewed. Christ is risen becomes not just a greeting for this time of year in situations like this. It becomes a statement of an act of defiance against a fallen world that tries to tell us this is all there is. There is nothing more. Well, we know as Christians, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that that is a lie because Christ is risen and all of the powers of this world are undone. Christ is risen, and He is risen indeed. Because of that, we can confidently celebrate in whatever way we can the resurrection of our Lord, the defeat of death, and have a happy Easter. Christ is risen. He is risen indeed.